Welcome to Hearths of Myths. Today, the horizon burns with a dull red glow, and the air tastes of sulfur and ancient stone. We are walking the complete path of the great sage who pacifies heaven, Niu Mo Wang, the Bull Demon King. The air of the ancient East does not move like the wind of the West. It is thick, woven with the scent of sandalwood, dampened by the mist of thousand-year-old pines, and heavy with the weight of spirits that have never known the boundaries of death. Close your eyes and let your breathing slow. Imagine yourself standing at the foot of a mountain that has no name in the mortal maps. The soil beneath your feet is dark, rich, and vibrating with a low, rhythmic hum that feels less like the earth and more like the beating of a giant heart. Above you, the canopy of the forest swallows the moonlight, leaving only jagged silver slivers to guide your way. In this world, the line between the physical and the metaphysical is not a wall, but a thin, permeable veil. This is the realm of the Yaogwa, the spirits and demons of the high peaks and deep caverns, and at the very center of this swirling, spiritual chaos stands a figure whose name has made the Jade Emperor himself hesitate in his golden throne. Niu Mo Wang, the Bull Demon King. Before we witness his deeds, we must understand the essence of his existence. To the ancient Chinese mind, a demon was not always an entity of pure evil, born from a hellish void. Instead, a demon was often a creature of the natural world, an animal, a stone, a tree, or a cloud, that had practiced the art of cultivation for centuries. By absorbing the essence of the moon and the sun, by breathing the qi of the mountains, these beings transcended their humble origins. They gained speech, they gained the ability to shift their forms, and most importantly, they gained a soul that rivaled the gods. Niu Mo Wang did not begin his journey in the courts of kings. He began as a force of nature, a primordial strength that was as old as the mountains themselves. Imagine a bull, not of flesh and blood, but of shadow and iron, standing amidst the thunderstorms of the early world, absorbing the lightning into his horns until he could stand upright and challenge the heavens with a voice that echoed like collapsing glaciers. His physical presence is the stuff of nightmares and reverence. In the primary texts, he is described as a titan among his kind. When he takes his humanoid form, he stands taller than 3 men, his shoulders wide enough to carry the weight of a province. His skin is the color of polished bronze, etched with the scars of 1,000 skirmishes against celestial soldiers. But it is his head that commands the most terror. His eyes are not mere organs of sight. They are glowing lanterns of smoldering amber, capable of seeing through the most intricate illusions of the spirit world. His horns, the true symbols of his majesty, are like twin ivory towers, curved toward the sky, capable of goring the very fabric of the clouds to summon a downpour. When he breathes, the air around him shimmers with heat, a reminder that the fire within his spirit is never truly extinguished. He wears armor forged from the scales of subterranean dragons, and his cape, dark as a moonless midnight, billows behind him even when there is no wind. But Niu Mo Wang is more than just a warrior. He is a king. Unlike many other demons who lived solitary lives in caves, the Bull King understood the power of hierarchy and civilization. He carved his kingdom out of the wild spaces that the gods in their arrogance had neglected. He gathered thousands of lesser spirits under his banner, providing them with laws, structure, and a sense of purpose. To his followers, he was not a monster. He was a protector, a sovereign who stood between them and the cold indifference of the celestial bureaucracy. He was the guardian of the outlands, the master of the mountains that the sunlight forgot. The symbolism of the bull in this context is crucial. In the agricultural heart of ancient China, the ox was the bringer of life, the silent, powerful engine that turned the soil and ensured the survival of the village. It represented patience, immense physical endurance, and a stubborn refusal to be broken. Niu Mo Wang embodied these traits but inverted them. His strength was not for the plow, it was for the rebellion. His endurance was not for the harvest, it was for the eternal struggle against the gods who sought to categorize and cage every spirit in the cosmos. He was the wild ox that would not be yoked, the bull that would rather tear down the walls of the palace than live within them as a servant. As you settle into this narrative, imagine the sound of his footsteps. They are not the light, ethereal steps of a Taoist immortal. They are heavy. They crack the stone. They announce a presence that cannot be ignored. In the halls of the Fire Mountains, where the heat is so intense that the rocks glow cherry red in the dark, Niu Mo Wang sits on a throne of obsidian. He is a philosopher king of the demon realm, a man who has studied the scrolls of the ancients and the movements of the stars, finding in them not a reason to submit, but a reason to expand his own will. He is the master of the 72 transformations, an art so complex that only a handful of beings in the history of the universe have mastered it. He can become a bird, a fish, a tree, or a mountain, yet in every form he retains that core of unyielding, bull-like stubbornness. To understand Niu Mo Wang is to understand the struggle for autonomy in a universe governed by rigid celestial laws. He represents the messy, beautiful, and dangerous vitality of the earth itself. He is the storm that breaks the drought, the earthquake that humbles the tall tower. In the chapters to come, we will see how this king of the wild spaces found a brother in a monkey born from a stone, how he loved a queen who wielded the wind, and how he eventually faced the combined might of the Buddha and the Taoist lords. But for now, just listen to the silence of the mountain. In that silence, if you are very still, you can hear the breathing of the Bull King, a sound that reminds us that beneath the surface of the world, there are powers that even the gods have reason to fear. The journey into the heart of the Fire Mountains has only just begun, and the shadows are growing long. The mountains of Huaguo were once a paradise of emerald moss and crystal waterfalls, a place where the sun seemed to linger longer than anywhere else in the mortal world. It was here, amidst the laughter of monkeys and the scent of wild peaches, that a brotherhood was forged that would eventually shake the pillars of heaven. Long before the journey to the west began, and long before the pilgrims set foot on their path of redemption, there was a time of alliance. This was the era of the 7 great sages, a fraternity of demon kings who dared to call themselves the equals of the gods, and at the head of this brotherhood, respected for his age, his wisdom, and his staggering power, was Niu Mo Wang. The meeting of the Bull King and Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, is one of the most pivotal moments in the early annals of mythology. Imagine the scene. Sun Wukong has just returned from the undersea palace of the Dragon King, wielding the Rui Jinggu Bang, the staff that could grow to touch the stars or shrink to the size of a needle. He was young, arrogant, and overflowing with a chaotic energy that the world had never seen. He had mastered the art of immortality, but he lacked a peer, someone who could look him in the eye without flinching. When Niu Mo Wang arrived at the mountain of flowers and fruits, he did not come as an enemy. He came as a connoisseur of strength. He recognized in the monkey a spirit that mirrored his own, a refusal to be governed by anything other than his own heart. A great feast was prepared. The primary texts describe this gathering with a richness that defies simple words. Imagine thousands of jars of wine made from the fermented nectar of celestial fruits, piles of roasted meats that could feed an army, and a music that was a mixture of birdsong and the rhythmic drumming of spirits. Around the central table sat the 7 kings, the Flood Dragon King, the Rock Demon King, the Lion Camel King, the Macaque King, the Tamarin King, and the 2 greatest of them all, the Bull and the Monkey. They were not merely drinking, they were weaving a web of defiance. They recognized that while the gods in heaven spent their days in quiet contemplation and rigid ceremony, they, the kings of the earth, were the true masters of vitality. It was Niu Mo Wang who proposed the titles. In a moment of wine-fueled clarity and epic ambition, he suggested that they should no longer be seen as mere demons or monsters. They were sages. They were masters of the way. He took for himself the title of Ping Tian Da Sheng, the great sage who pacifies heaven. Think of the sheer audacity of those words. To pacify heaven implies that the celestial realm is a place of disorder that requires the steady hand of a bull king to bring it to peace. It was a direct challenge to the authority of the Jade Emperor. Sun Wukong, inspired by his brother, took the title Qitian Da Sheng, the great sage equaling heaven. Together, they established a hierarchy of the wild, a parallel government that claimed sovereignty over the mountains, the seas, and the skies. The relationship between Niu Mo Wang and Sun Wukong during this time was one of genuine camaraderie, but it was also shaded by a subtle competition. Niu Mo Wang was the elder, the steady anchor to Wukong's erratic fire. While Wukong was a whirlwind of motion, Niu Mo Wang was a mountain of presence. He taught the younger monkey the intricacies of demon politics, the ways to manage vast territories, and the importance of family and lineage. It is often forgotten that Niu Mo Wang was a family man even then. He spoke of his home in the Fire Mountains, of his wife, the Princess Iron Fan, and of the responsibilities that came with being a king. He was the mirror in which Wukong saw what he could become, a settled, powerful monarch of a demon empire. But this alliance was built on a foundation of rebellion. When the Monkey King eventually launched his solo assault on the heavenly palaces, stealing the peaches of immortality and wreaking havoc in the Jade Emperor's court, the other sages watched from the shadows. Niu Mo Wang did not join the front lines of that specific battle, and this is a point of great debate among scholars of the journey to the West. Some say he was too wise to throw away his kingdom in a war that he knew Wukong could not win alone. Others suggest that he was the strategist, the one who remained behind to ensure that if Wukong fell, the demon realm would still have a leader. Whatever the reason, the bond was strained but not broken. When Wukong was eventually trapped beneath the 5 Elements mountain by the Buddha, the Bull King returned to his own lands, carrying the secret of their brotherhood like a smoldering coal in his breast. During the 500 years that Wukong spent imprisoned, Niu Mo Wang's power only grew. He did not waste time in mourning. He expanded his influence, marrying into the ancient line of the Luocha, and fathering a son who would become a legend in his own right. He built the Fire Mountains into a fortress that even the heavenly scouts feared to approach. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, far removed from the frantic energy of his youth. He became a legend that was whispered about in the mortal villages, the great bull who could command the very heat of the earth. This period of his life defines the sage aspect of his title. He was not just a fighter, he was a cultivator of deep magic. He spent decades in meditation, perfecting the art of the soul. He understood that physical strength was merely a tool, and that true power lay in the ability to command the elements. He could call upon the underground rivers of fire. He could speak to the spirits of the rocks, and he could mask his entire kingdom in a veil of heat mirages that led unwanted travelers to their doom. He was the master of his domain, a king who had outlasted the reckless rebellion of his brother and built something that promised to be eternal. As we look back at this era of the Brotherhood, we see a tragic irony. The very traits that made them brothers, their pride, their strength, their refusal to submit, would eventually be the things that tore them apart. Niu Mo Wang's loyalty to his family and his kingdom would one day clash with Wukong's new loyalty to the Buddhist path. But in these golden years at Huaguo Mountain, they were simply two kings sharing a jar of wine under a silver moon, believing that the world was theirs for the taking. The thunder was distant then, a low rumble on the horizon, but Niu Mo Wang was ready. He was the sage who pacified heaven, and in his heart he believed that no god, no Buddha, and no monkey could ever truly bring him to his knees. The mountains of the spirit world are never truly silent. Even when the birds have ceased their song and the waterfalls have slowed to a crystalline trickle, there is a hum, a vibration of ancient power that resonates within the bedrock of the world. Imagine yourself back at the summit of Huaguo Mountain, the mountain of flowers and fruits. The mist here does not merely cling to the earth. It flows like a river of silver silk, weaving through the jagged peaks and ancient pines. This was the stage for an assembly that remains unparalleled in the history of the three realms. It was a gathering of monarchs who lived outside the mandate of heaven, a parliament of the wild, and at its center sat the bull demon king, his presence like a dark, immovable sun around which all other powers orbited. To understand the weight of this brotherhood, one must look beyond Sun Wukong and Niu Mo Wang. The seven great sages were not merely a collection of powerful monsters. They were the personification of the elemental forces that the Jade Emperor could not tame. Beside Niu Mo Wang sat the Flood Dragon King, Jade Mo Wang, whose scales were the color of deep-sea trenches and whose breath could command the tides of the four oceans. He represented the fluidity and the crushing pressure of the depths. Then there was the Rock Demon King, Peng Mo Wang, a creature whose wingspan, it was said, could eclipse the sun, bringing a premature night to entire provinces with a single beat. He was the master of the high winds, the sovereign of the empty spaces between the clouds. Each of these kings brought their own legions, their own stories, and their own grievances against the celestial hierarchy. There was the Lion Camel King, Shituo Wang, whose roar was a sonic wave that could shatter the gates of fortified cities, and the Macaque King and Tamarin King, cousins to Wukong in form, but elders in the arts of shadows and spiritual manipulation. They were gathered under a sky that seemed to hold its breath. The feast they held was a ritual of defiance. The jars of wine were not filled with mortal spirits, but with the distilled essence of mountain springs and celestial dew, a liquid that burned with the heat of stars and the coolness of the moon. Niu Mo Wang presided over this council with a dignity that was both terrifying and reassuring. He understood the philosophy of their existence. In the eyes of the Taoist immortals, these kings were yaogua, accidents of nature, creatures that had stolen the secrets of immortality. But Niu Mo Wang argued that their power was more legitimate than that of the gods. The gods were appointed. The sages were cultivated. The gods lived in palaces built of light and merit, but the sages lived in the raw, unrefined reality of the earth. His voice, when he spoke to the assembly, did not carry the shrill command of a general, but the deep, resonant authority of a patriarch. He spoke of a world where the mountains were not just obstacles to be managed by celestial officials, but living entities with their own sovereignty. This was the birth of the title, Great Sage, who pacifies heaven, Pingtian Da Sheng. The word pacify is a masterstroke of political and spiritual irony. In choosing this name, Niu Mo Wang was positioning himself as the true arbiter of order. He was suggesting that the celestial court, with its endless bureaucracy and rigid moral codes, was actually a source of cosmic friction. By pacifying heaven, he meant to bring it into a natural balance with the wild spirits of the earth. He envisioned a dual kingdom, one of the light and one of the shadows, existing in a state of mutual respect. It was a dream of a balanced universe where the bull and the dragon could roam as freely as the gods could float. As the wine flowed and the stars turned above the Huaguo peaks, the brotherhood swore an oath that was written in the very chi of the mountain. They pledged that an attack on one was an attack on all. They created a network of tunnels, spirit paths, and cloud bridges that connected their kingdoms. From the northern tundras to the southern jungles, the word was carried by birds and spirits. The Bull King had united the wild. This was a direct threat to the celestial mandate. The Jade Emperor's officials, watching through their telescopes of jade and pearl, felt a cold shiver of realization. The earth was no longer a collection of scattered tribes. It was an empire of the extraordinary. But within this brotherhood, the relationship between Niu Mo Wang and Sun Wukong remained the most complex. Wukong was a flame, reckless, bright, and consuming. Niu Mo Wang was the hearth, the structure that contained the fire and gave it purpose. He watched Wukong's antics with a mixture of pride and a fatherly concern. He knew that the monkey's desire to equal heaven was a path that led to a confrontation with the ultimate void. Niu Mo Wang's own ambition was more grounded. He did not want to replace the Jade Emperor. He wanted to be ignored by him. He wanted his kingdom of the Fire Mountains to remain a sovereign enclave where the rules of the heavens did not apply. The tragedy of this brotherhood lies in its eventual dissolution. When Wukong's rebellion reached its peak, and the great sage equaling heaven stood alone against the heavenly hosts, the other sages were forced to make a choice. The myths are quiet on the specifics of their retreat, but the implications are clear. Niu Mo Wang saw the movement of the stars and the arrival of the Buddha. He understood that the era of open rebellion had ended, and the era of survival had begun. He withdrew his forces, not out of cowardice, but out of a responsibility to the thousands of spirits who depended on his wisdom. He chose to preserve the demon realm rather than burn it in the fire of Wukong's pride. Imagine the Bull King returning to his obsidian throne in the Fire Mountains as Wukong was being sealed beneath the mountain of stone. The silence must have been agonizing. He had lost his brother, but he had kept his crown. For 5 centuries, he would rule in shadow, a king who had outlasted a revolution. He spent those years deepening his cultivation, moving from the strength of the fist to the strength of the soul. He became a figure of myth, even to the other demons, the one who had walked with the Monkey King and lived to tell the tale. He was the anchor of the demon world, the silent, breathing mountain that reminded all who looked toward the west that the age of the sages was not dead, merely sleeping. In this silence, Niu Mo Wang became more than a warrior. He became a legend of endurance. He was the bull that would not be moved by the changing winds of celestial politics. He watched as the mortal dynasties rose and fell, as temples were built and crumbled, and as the name of Sun Wukong faded into a cautionary tale. But Niu Mo Wang remained. He was the great sage who pacified heaven, and as he sat in the red glow of his subterranean halls, he knew that the story of the Brotherhood was not over. The threads of fate were still being spun, and the monkey would one day return. When that day came, the Bull King would be ready, not as a brother, but as a mountain that must finally be reckoned with. The transition from the lush, green paradise of Huaguo Mountain to the scorched, unforgiving terrain of the Fire Mountains is more than a change in geography. It is a descent into a realm where the very atmosphere is a test of the soul. Imagine a horizon where the sky is never blue, but a bruised, permanent violet, streaked with the orange glow of eternal furnaces. The air here does not refresh. It singes the lungs, carrying the scent of sulfur and ancient molten rock. This is the domain of Niu Mo Wang, the Pinting Mountain and the surrounding volcanic ranges, a fortress carved out of the earth's most violent impulses. To the mortal eye, it is a hellscape, but to the Bull Demon King, it is a masterpiece of natural power and strategic brilliance. At the heart of this burning kingdom lies the cave of the skyscraping pine on Pinting Mountain. This is not a mere hole in the earth, but a subterranean palace of staggering proportions. The walls are made of obsidian, cooled and polished by spirit fire until they reflect the flickering torches like dark, fathomless mirrors. The pillars are thick as the trunks of ancient redwoods, hewn from the living rock and etched with sigils that hum with the protective magic of the Bull King. Here, Niu Mo Wang lived not as a savage beast, but as a sophisticated monarch. He surrounded himself with the spoils of his long life, ancient scrolls written on indestructible silk, jade ornaments that glowed with their own internal light, and weapons that had tasted the blood of 100 generations. Central to his majesty was his legendary steed, the Bishui Jinying Shou, the water, crystal, golden-eyed beast. In the lore of the 3 realms, a king is often defined by what he rides, and Niu Mo Wang's choice of Binek was as unique as his own nature. Imagine a creature that defies the simple categories of the natural world. It had the body of a dragon, the head of a lion, and scales that shimmered with the iridescence of a deep-sea pearl. Its eyes were 2 burning orbs of gold, capable of seeing through the thickest smoke of the Fire Mountains or the darkest depths of the oceans. This beast was a gift of the elements, a creature that could walk through fire without singeing a hair and gallop across the surface of the sea as if it were solid ground. The relationship between the Bull King and the golden-eyed beast was one of perfect, unspoken synergy. It was not a master and a servant, but a king and his loyal companion. The beast possessed its own intelligence, a silent wisdom that mirrored the Bull King's own brooding nature. When Niu Mo Wang mounted the beast, they became a singular force of nature. They could traverse thousands of miles in a single night, moving with the silence of a cloud and the speed of a thunderbolt. The beast's ability to move between the extremes of fire and water symbolized Niu Mo Wang's own mastery over the dualities of existence. He was a creature of the heat, yet he possessed the fluidity of the water. But the true source of Niu Mo Wang's power lay in his mastery of the 72 transformations, the earthly multitudes. While Sun Wukong is the most famous practitioner of this art, Niu Mo Wang's execution was arguably more profound. To Wukong, transformation was a tool for trickery and escape, a way to bypass guards or mock his enemies. To Niu Mo Wang, it was a manifestation of his cosmic weight. When he transformed, he did not just change his shape, he changed his essence. He could become a mountain that moved, a river that burned, or a storm that could speak. His most terrifying form, however, was his original divine state, the Great White Bull. The description of this form in the primary texts is enough to paralyze the heart of the bravest warrior. Imagine a bull of pure, radiant white, standing 1,000 feet tall from hoof to horn. Its body is a landscape of muscle and power, its skin thick as the armor of a war galley. Its horns are not ivory, but twin beams of celestial light that can gore the very sun. When Niu Mo Wang took this form, he was no longer a demon. He was a primordial god of the earth. His footsteps caused earthquakes that could be felt in the mortal world, and his bellow was a sound that could shake the foundations of the underworld. This was the form he kept for the most dire of circumstances, a reminder to all that he was the son of the earth's rawest, most unyielding strength. Managing a kingdom like the Fire Mountains required more than just brute force. Niu Mo Wang was a master of the spirit legions. He commanded thousands of lesser demons, fox spirits, wolf warriors, and mountain imps. But he did not rule them through fear alone. He provided them with a civilization. He established a court with its own rituals, its own justice system, and its own economy. He understood that a king is only as strong as the stability of his realm. He was the administrator of the Outlands, the one who ensured that the chaotic energies of the demon world were channeled into something constructive. He built irrigation systems that used spirit water to cool the overheated soil, allowing rare and magical herbs to grow in the shadows of the volcanoes. This sense of order extended to his personal life. Niu Mo Wang was a man of deep, if complicated, attachments. His marriage to the Princess Iron Fan was a union of two elemental powers. She was the mistress of the wind, wielding the plantain fan that could extinguish the fires of the mountains or summon a gale that could blow a man halfway across the world. Their palace was a place of high culture amidst the heat. They hosted banquets where poetry was recited and music was played on flutes made of dragon bone. This domesticity is a crucial aspect of Niu Mo Wang's character. He was not a wandering monster. He was a man who had built a home, a legacy, and a family. As you imagine the Bull King sitting in his obsidian hall, surrounded by the glow of the Fire Mountains, consider the complexity of his position. He was a rebel who had become a ruler. He was a demon who had mastered the arts of the sages. He was a husband and a father who carried the scars of an ancient brotherhood. The Bishui Jinying Shou would lie at his feet, its golden eyes reflecting the embers of the hearth, and for a moment the world would seem at peace. But Niu Mo Wang knew that the peace was an illusion. The Fire Mountains were not just a home, they were a fortress, and a fortress is only necessary when one knows that a siege is coming. The wind outside the cave of the sky-scraping pine would howl, carrying the distant echoes of the mortal world, but the Bull King would remain unmoved. He was the master of the 72 transformations, the rider of the golden-eyed beast, and the architect of a kingdom that defied the gods. He had built his paradise in the middle of a furnace, and he was prepared to defend it with every ounce of his staggering strength. The shadows of the Fire Mountains were long and deep, but in their center, the Bull King's amber eyes remained open, watching the horizon for the return of the monkey and the arrival of the storm. The Fire Mountains are a place of absolute heat, a furnace that never cools, but every storm requires a counterbalance, and every king requires a queen who holds the keys to the invisible realms. As we move deeper into the life of Niu Mo Wang, we must turn our gaze toward a figure who is as much a goddess as she is a demon, a woman whose lineage stretches back to the primal Rakshasas of the ancient world. This is the Princess Iron Fan, known in the oldest scrolls as Luocha Nu. She is not merely the wife of the Bull King. She is the mistress of the elemental air, the guardian of a power that can extinguish the very fires of heaven or stir the oceans into a frenzy. To understand Niu Mo Wang, one must understand the union of the bull and the Rakshasi, for their marriage was the ultimate convergence of the earth's weight and the sky's fury. Imagine a hidden valley tucked away from the direct glare of the magma, where the air is slightly cooler and the scent of jasmine struggles to survive against the smell of sulfur. This is the cave of the palm leaf, the private sanctuary of the princess. Unlike the obsidian halls of Niu Mo Wang, this palace is draped in silks that catch the light like the wings of dragonflies. But do not let the beauty deceive you. The princess is a being of immense spiritual cultivation. She is a Rakshasi, a race of spirits that predates many of the younger gods in the Jade Emperor's court. In the hybrid lore of Buddhist and Taoist traditions, the Rakshasa are beings of terrifying power, often depicted as man-eaters. But through centuries of meditation and the study of the Tao, Luocha Nu transformed her primordial hunger into a divine authority. She is recognized by the local people not as a monster to be feared, but as a deity to be appeased. The centerpiece of her power, and the object that defines her role in the cosmos, is the Bao Shan, the precious plantain fan. This is not a man-made tool. The primary texts tell us that this fan was formed at the very beginning of the universe, during the era of chaos, when the yin and yang were first beginning to separate. It was a leaf from a divine plant that grew on the spiritual peaks of the Kunlun Mountains, nurtured by the primordial dew and the first rays of the sun. It is a treasure of pure yin. When it is fanned once, it can extinguish a fire that covers 1,000 miles. When it is fanned twice, it can summon a wind that brings rain to a dying province. When it is fanned 3 times, it creates a gale so powerful that it can blow a god through the gates of the underworld. The marriage between Niu Mo Wang and Princess Iron Fan was a strategic and spiritual alignment of the highest order. Imagine the Bull King, the embodiment of terrestrial strength, the immovable mountain, joining his fate with the mistress of the wind. Together, they represented the perfect cycle of nature. In the Fire Mountains, it was the princess who provided the only relief to the parched earth. Every year, the local villagers would bring offerings of gold, silk, and livestock to her gates, begging her to use the fan to cool the mountains so they could plant their crops. She was their provider, their rainmaker, and their queen. Niu Mo Wang respected this authority. He did not rule over her. He ruled beside her. In their shared history, we see a rare glimpse of a demon household that functioned with the dignity of a royal court. As you sit in the silence of your own mind, imagine the atmosphere of their banquets. Niu Mo Wang would sit on a couch of tiger skin, his amber eyes softened by the presence of his queen. She would wear robes of emerald green, her hair held in place by pins carved from the bones of phoenixes. They would discuss the movements of the stars and the rising power of the mortal kingdoms. There was a deep, intellectual bond between them. They were both cultivators of the way, seekers of a truth that existed beyond the rigid dogmas of the celestial bureaucracy. They saw themselves as the true nobility of the wild, the sovereigns of a world that didn't need the permission of the heavens to exist. However, the nature of a Rakshasi is inherently volatile. The princess was a woman of fierce pride and a temper that mirrored the suddenness of a mountain storm. She held her husband's loyalty as her most precious possession, and as we will see in the later chapters of this saga, any threat to that loyalty was met with a wrath that could shake the foundations of the Fire Mountains. She was the anchor of Niu Mo Wang's domestic life, but she was also a warrior. She practiced the art of the sword with a grace that was lethal, her movements so fast that she seemed to blur into a whirlwind of steel. She was the protector of their home, the one who managed the spirit servants and ensured that the sanctity of their palace was never breached by unwanted immortals. The tragedy of their relationship is often overlooked in shorter versions of the myth. Their union was challenged by the very longevity that they sought through cultivation. Centuries of life can lead to a wandering heart, and even a king as grounded as Niu Mo Wang was not immune to the temptations of the spirit world. But in the golden years of their reign, they were the envy of the demon realm. They had a son, a child born of fire and wind, who would carry their legacy into the next age. This child, the Red Boy, was the jewel of their kingdom, and his upbringing was a mixture of the Bull King's discipline and the princess's elemental grace. Think of the Princess Iron Fan not as a villain, but as a sovereign mother. She spent decades teaching her son how to channel the energy of the volcanoes, how to respect the spirits of the wind, and how to maintain the dignity of their lineage. She was a mother who would sacrifice the world to protect her child. When we eventually see her clashing with Sun Wukong, it is not just over a fan. It is over the violation of her family's peace. She represents the fierce, protective love that is found in the deepest roots of the earth. She is the wind that cools the brow of the laborer and the storm that destroys the house of the intruder. In the quiet hours of the night, when the magma of the Fire Mountains glows like a distant city, the princess would stand on the balcony of her palace, the plantain fan resting in her hand. She would look out over the parched landscape and know that she held the life of the province in her palm. Niu Mo Wang would stand behind her, a silent shadow of protection. They were the masters of the heat and the cold, the fire and the wind. They were a mythic family in a world that was becoming increasingly hostile to their kind. But as long as they stood together, As long as the fan remained in her grip and the bull remained on his throne, they believed that their kingdom would endure until the stars themselves grew cold. In the heart of the Fire Mountains, where the rock itself seems to breathe and the air is thick with the scent of ancient alchemy, a legacy was born that would eventually challenge the power of the Bodhisattvas. To understand Niu Mo Wang's pride, we must look at his son, the child known as Hong Hei-er, or the Red Boy. He was not a mere demon child. He was the distillation of his father's terrestrial power and his mother's Rakshasi grace, a prince of the outlands who achieved a level of cultivation that few immortals could ever hope to reach. For 300 years, the Red Boy lived apart from his parents on the fiery cloud cave of the Mount Huoyun, practicing a secret and terrifying art that transformed him into one of the most dangerous entities in the three realms. Imagine a child who looks no older than 7 or 8 years, with skin as fair as white jade and lips as red as cinnabar. He wears a suit of crimson armor and carries a spear of enchanted iron that is twice his height. But his most striking feature is his eyes. They do not possess the amber glow of his father, but a bright, flickering intensity that suggests a furnace burning behind his pupils. This is the master of the Sunmei Zhenhuo, the true fire of Samadhi. This is not the ordinary fire that burns wood or melts metal. This is a divine flame, a spiritual energy that is generated from within the 3 gates of the body, the heart, the kidneys, and the mind. It is a fire that can burn through the strongest magic, a fire that even the waters of the 4 oceans cannot extinguish. The origin of this fire is a matter of great mythological significance. Some say the Red Boy learned the secrets of the Samadhi fire by breathing the essence of the Fire Mountains for 3 centuries, absorbing the residual heat from the 8 trigrams furnace of Lao Tzu that had fallen to earth during Sun Wukong's rebellion. Others suggest it was a natural talent, a manifestation of the elemental blood that flowed through his veins. Regardless of its source, the Red Boy mastered it with a terrifying precision. He could exhale a cloud of smoke that could blind a god, and follow it with a blast of fire that could turn a mountain into a lake of glass. He was a prodigy of destruction, a child who played with the fundamental energies of the universe as if they were toys. Niu Mo Wang viewed his son with a mixture of immense pride and a strange, distant respect. He recognized that the Red Boy was, in some ways, more powerful than he had been at that age. The Bull King had provided his son with a kingdom of his own, the Mount Huoyun, where the boy ruled over a legion of lesser demons. This was Niu Mo Wang's way of ensuring his son developed the independence and the kingly spirit that defined their lineage. He didn't want a servant. He wanted a successor. He wanted a bull that would one day lead the spirit world with the same stubborn authority that he possessed. The relationship between the father and the son was built on the foundation of filial piety, but it was a demon's version of the concept. The Red Boy worshipped his father, considering him the ultimate master of the earth. He would often send messengers to the Fire Mountains with gifts of rare herbs and stolen treasures to show his devotion. But there was also an unspoken competition. The Red Boy wanted to prove that his fire could conquer what his father's strength could not. He wanted to expand the family's influence into the territories governed by the Taoist lords, pushing the boundaries of what a demon was allowed to do. As you imagine the Red Boy sitting on his throne in the fiery cloud cave, consider the loneliness of such a high level of cultivation. He was a child who had never known childhood. He had spent his formative centuries in deep meditation, focusing on the circulation of his internal chi, turning his own spirit into a weapon. He was surrounded by servants who feared him, and enemies who underestimated him because of his appearance. This made him arrogant, fierce, and incredibly sensitive to his dignity. He was a reflection of Niu Mo Wang's own rebellion, but without the tempering influence of his father's age and wisdom. He was the raw, unrefined energy of the Bull King's youth, reborn in a body that never grew old. The Red Boy's palace was a fortress of heat. He designed a series of 5 fire carts, ritualistic vehicles that were arranged in the pattern of the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. When he stood upon these carts and performed his secret mudras, he could amplify his samadhi fire 100-fold. This was his great art, a technique that combined alchemy, geometry, and raw spiritual power. It was this power that would eventually bring Sun Wukong to the brink of death. The Monkey King, who had survived the furnace of Lao Tzu and the lightning of the heavens, found himself helpless against the fire of his own nephew. The smoke of the Red Boy's samadhi fire found the one weakness in Wukong's eyes, a reminder that the lineage of the Bull King was not to be trifled with. In the domestic life of Niu Mo Wang, the success of the Red Boy was a frequent topic of conversation. The Bull King and the Princess Iron Fan would speak of their son's deeds with the quiet satisfaction of aristocrats. They saw his power as a validation of their own choices. They had refused to serve the heavens, and in return the universe had given them a son who could force the heavens to take notice. To them, the Red Boy was the ultimate proof that the wild spirits were not inferior to the celestial ones. He was their masterpiece, a prince of the flames who carried the weight of the bull and the fury of the Rakshasi into a new era. But there is a subtle melancholy in this part of Niu Mo Wang's story. The more powerful the son became, the further he moved from the family hearth. The Red Boy's independence was a double-edged sword. He was a king in his own right, which meant he was also subject to his own fates. Niu Mo Wang, with his centuries of experience, knew that such a bright fire often attracts the attention of the great powers, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, who seek to tame what they cannot destroy. He watched his sons rise with a watchful eye, knowing that the boy's arrogance would eventually draw the gaze of Guan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion. As the smoke from the fiery cloud cave drifted across the northern skies, the Bull King would sit in his obsidian hall and wonder if he had taught his son enough about the nature of survival. Strength is a tool, but wisdom is a shield. The Red Boy had the fire, but he lacked the patience of the ox. He was a spectacular, burning comet in the night sky of the demon realm, a testament to the power of Niu Mo Wang's bloodline. But comets, as the Bull King well knew, either burn out or are captured by the gravity of greater suns. The story of the Red Boy is the story of a father's pride and the inevitable loss that comes when a child becomes too powerful for his own home. The fires were burning high, and the world was watching the son of the bull with a mixture of awe and growing dread. The passage of centuries for an immortal is not merely the ticking of a clock, but the slow, inevitable shifting of the soul's tectonic plates. Even a king as steady as Niu Mo Wang, a being whose very essence is rooted in the stubborn endurance of the bull, is not immune to the erosion of time and the allure of a new sanctuary. As we move away from the scorched peaks of the Fire Mountains, we travel to the accumulated Thunder Mountain, known in the ancient scrolls as Jile Shan. Here, the atmosphere is markedly different. Gone is the oppressive heat of the volcanoes. In its place is a lush, perennial autumn, where the air is scented with the fragrance of rare orchids and the cool dampness of high-altitude clouds. This is the domain of the jade-faced princess, Niu Mo Wang, a fox spirit of extraordinary beauty and immense wealth. And it is here that we find the bull demon king, in a state of self-imposed exile from his own family hearth. To understand this shift in Niu Mo Wang's life, one must understand the nature of the fox spirit in the hierarchy of the Yaogua. While the Princess Iron Fan was a creature of elemental wind and ancient Rakshasa dignity, the jade-faced princess represented the refined aesthetic allure of the cultivated spirit. She was the daughter of the king of thousands of years, an ancient fox demon who had spent millennia accumulating a fortune in jade, gold, and spiritual treasures. Upon her father's passing, the princess found herself the mistress of a vast estate, but without a protector capable of defending such riches from the predations of the demon world. She sought a husband not for love in the mortal sense, but for the weight of his shadow. She needed a titan, and Niu Mo Wang, with his reputation as the sage who pacified heaven, was the only choice. The Bull King's decision to live at the cloud-touching cave, the Moyen Dong, was a complicated betrayal. It was not merely a matter of physical attraction. Niu Mo Wang was a king who had spent centuries in the harsh military environment of the Fire Mountains. At the accumulated Thunder Mountain, he found a life of soft edges. Imagine a palace where the floors are laid with slabs of white jade that remain cool even in the height of summer, and where the walls are hung with tapestries. No, with silken veils that are embroidered with the histories of the stars. The servants here are fox fairies who move with the silence of falling snow, and the music is the constant, gentle chime of silver bells caught in the breeze. For Niu Mo Wang, this was a retreat into a luxury that allowed him to forget, for a time, the growing tensions of the celestial world and the heavy responsibilities of his bloodline. However, this comfort came at a staggering cost to his honor and his legacy. By choosing to live with the jade-faced princess, he effectively abandoned the Princess Iron Fan to the loneliness of her own scorched palace. The primary texts suggest that Niu Mo Wang had not seen his first wife in nearly 2 years by the time the pilgrims arrived. He sent her gifts, pallets of gold, barrels of fine wine, and rare silks, trying to pay for his absence with material wealth. But the Princess Iron Fan was a woman of spirit, not of commerce. Every gift he sent was a reminder of the distance between them, a distance that was being filled by the soft laughter of a fox spirit. The Bull King, in his stubbornness, believed he could maintain 2 worlds, but the universe of the spirit does not allow for such fragmentation without a price. The jade-faced princess herself is a study in the power of perceived fragility. She is described as having skin like the first petals of a lily, and eyes that hold the shimmering light of a mountain lake. She did not command the wind like Luocha Nu. She commanded the heart through the subtle arts of poetry, scent, and conversation. She made Niu Mo Wang feel not like a warrior king, but like a sage emperor. She provided him with an environment where his every whim was anticipated. Yet, beneath this softness was the iron-clad pragmatism of her kind. She knew that her safety depended entirely on the Bull King's presence. She fostered his comfort as a way of ensuring her own survival. She was the architect of his domestic entrapment, weaving a web of silk that was harder to break than any iron chain. As you imagine the Bull King walking through the gardens of the accumulated Thunder Mountain, think of the psychological weight he carried. He was a man who had fathered a son capable of challenging the bodhisattvas, yet he was living as a Jui Shu, a live-in son-in-law, in the house of a fox. This contradiction was a festering wound in his dignity, even if he refused to acknowledge it. He was the master of 72 transformations, yet he could not transform his situation into one of honor. He spent his days in meditation and his nights in banquets, but the amber fire in his eyes never truly dimmed. He was waiting for something to shatter the peace, for a sign that his era of comfort was coming to an end. This signs arrived in the form of a name whispered in the wind: Sun Wukong. When the news reached the accumulated Thunder Mountain that the Monkey King had returned and was serving a monk on a journey to the west, Niu Mo Wang felt a surge of ancient, conflicting emotions. He remembered the peach-scented air of Huaguo Mountain and the jars of wine they had shared as brothers. But he also remembered the 500 years of silence and the fact that Wukong had recently been responsible for the capture of his son, the Red Boy. The arrival of Wukong was not a reunion. It was the arrival of a reckoning. The past was coming to reclaim the Bull King from his jade-lined nest. The jade-faced princess sensed the change in her husband. She saw the way his hand tightened on the hilt of his mace, and the way he looked toward the horizon where the sun set over the Fire Mountains. She tried to distract him with new treasures and deeper music, but the Bull King was no longer listening. The atmosphere of the accumulated Thunder Mountain, once so soothing, now felt stagnant. The scent of the orchids felt like the smell of decay. Niu Mo Wang realized that a bull cannot live in a garden of lilies forever. He was a creature of the storm, and the storm was calling him back to the scorched earth and the broken ties of his family. The domestic drama of Niu Mo Wang is the most humanizing aspect of his legend. It shows a king who is flawed, a man who seeks escape from the intensity of his own power. It reveals the cracks in the great sage facade. As he prepared to leave the Moyendong to face the ghosts of his past, he did so with the knowledge that he had betrayed the very foundation of his strength, his loyalty. He had traded the wind for the silk and the volcano for the garden. But as he stepped out onto the mountain path, the clouds began to gather, and the low rumble of thunder reminded him that he was still the Bull Demon King. The garden was behind him, and the fire was ahead. The fragmented hearth could no longer be ignored. It had to be mended, or it had to be burned to the ground. The air over the Fire Mountains began to vibrate with a frequency that the earth had not felt in half a millennium. It was a resonance of iron and spirit, the sound of an inevitable collision between two forces that were once brothers and were now strangers, bound by a shared history of rebellion and a current reality of betrayal. Sun Wukong, the great sage equaling heaven, had arrived at the gates of the Bull King's world, not as a guest, but as a petitioner with a desperate need. He needed the plantain fan to quench the flames that blocked the path of his master, the Tang priest. But to get the fan, he had to navigate the labyrinth of Niu Mo Wang's pride and the deep, scorched wounds of a family he had inadvertently helped to shatter. Imagine the first encounter between these two titans. It did not happen with a roar of battle, but with the cold, heavy silence of a mountain. Niu Mo Wang was returning from the accumulated Thunder Mountain, riding his golden-eyed beast across the clouds, when he saw the small, familiar figure standing on the parched earth below. Sun Wukong did not look like the rebel who had once wrecked the heavenly palaces. He was dressed in the humble robes of a pilgrim, his golden headband a symbol of his submission to the Buddhist path. To the Bull King, this was the ultimate insult. His brother, the firebrand of Huaguo Mountain, had become a servant to a mortal. The man who had challenged the Jade Emperor was now begging for a favor from the very demons he used to lead. The tension in the atmosphere was palpable. The heat of the fire mountains seemed to intensify, as if the volcanoes themselves were holding their breath. Niu Mo Wang descended from the sky, his presence casting a shadow that swallowed the Monkey King. He did not offer a greeting. Instead, he spoke of his son. He spoke of Hong Haier, the Red Boy, who had been taken by Guan Yin and turned into a servant of the Lotus Throne. To Wukong, this was an act of mercy and salvation. To the Bull King, it was the kidnapping of his legacy. "You helped the Bodhisattva steal my flesh and blood," the Bull King's voice rumbled like a landslide. "And now you come to borrow my wife's treasure? You have the heart of a beast and the face of a brother." Wukong, despite his famous temper, tried to maintain the composure of a monk. He spoke of the greater good, of the scriptures that would save all sentient beings, and of the necessity of their journey. He reminded the Bull King of their ancient oath. But words have little weight in the face of a father's grief and a king's sense of betrayal. Niu Mo Wang saw only the betrayal. He saw a brother who had abandoned the demon realm for a seat in the celestial hierarchy. He saw a man who had forgotten the taste of the mountain wine. The dialogue between them was a bridge that had already collapsed. There was no way to cross it. The first blow was struck not with anger, but with the inevitability of a collapsing star. Niu Mo Wang drew his mixed iron mace, a weapon that had been forged in the heart of a fallen sun, heavy enough to tilt the axis of a moon. Wukong raised his Ruyi Jinggu Bang. When the iron rod met the iron mace, the sound was a physical wave that flattened the scorched trees for miles around. The sky over the fire mountains turned a bruised, angry red. This was not the quick, agile skirmish of lesser spirits. This was the combat of the primary powers. Each strike was a statement of their entire lives. Wukong moved like a golden flash, his speed defying the limitations of the physical world. But Niu Mo Wang was the mountain. He did not need to be fast. He needed to be immovable. The physical scale of their battle moved from the earth to the clouds. They wrestled in the air, their spiritual auras clashing like the aurora borealis. Niu Mo Wang used his 72 transformations to match Wukong's every trick. When Wukong became a hawk, the Bull King became a phoenix. When Wukong became a tiger, the Bull King became a lion. It was a deadly game of chess played with the fabric of reality. But beneath the magic was a raw, visceral desperation. Niu Mo Wang was fighting for his dignity, for the honor of his wife, and for the memory of his son. Wukong was fighting for his mission, for his redemption, and for the path that he had chosen. As the battle raged, Sun Wukong realized that he could not defeat the Bull King through strength alone. Niu Mo Wang's Asmagin, his god strength, was rooted in the earth itself. As long as his hooves touched the ground or his spirit remained connected to the mountains, he was inexhaustible. Wukong, ever the trickster, decided to change his tactics. He knew that the Bull King's greatest weakness was not his skill, but his heart. He decided to target the domestic fractures that Niu Mo Wang had left behind. He would go to the Princess Iron Fan, but he would do so using the Bull King's own face. This was the beginning of the psychological siege. Wukong transformed himself into a perfect replica of Niu Mo Wang. He flew to the cave of the palm leaf, smelling of the accumulated Thunder Mountain, carrying the weary grace of a husband returning home. The Princess Iron Fan, who had been grieving in her solitude, welcomed him with a mixture of suspicion and a desperate hope. The ensuing scene is one of the most tragic in the journey to the west. Wukong, in the guise of the Bull King, drank wine with her, listened to her grievances, and manipulated her emotions to learn the secret of the fan. He was violating the most sacred space of the Bull King's life, his marriage. Meanwhile, the real Niu Mo Wang was searching for Wukong, his rage growing with every passing moment. He felt a disturbance in the spiritual energy of his home. He sensed the intrusion. When he realized what the monkey had done, that Wukong had stolen his form to trick his wife, the last remnants of his brotherly affection vanished. The fire within him became a cold, white-hot furnace. He was no longer just a king defending his territory. He was a man whose soul had been violated. He tracked Wukong back toward the pilgrim's camp, his mace glowing with a lethal subterranean energy. The first part of the conflict ended with the theft of the fan and the revelation of the trickery. But it was only the beginning. Wukong had the fan, but he did not have the secret incantation to make it work properly. And the Bull King was no longer fighting a duel. He was launching a war. He summoned his spirit legions. He called upon the elemental powers of the volcanoes, and he prepared to show the Monkey King why he was the only being who had truly earned the title of Great Sage. The siege of broken ties had begun, and the Fire Mountains would be the crucible where the fate of the Brotherhood would be decided. The thunder was no longer distant. It was right above their heads, and the lightning was ready to strike. The atmosphere over the Fire Mountains had long since ceased to be mere air. It had transformed into a pressurized chamber of spiritual friction, a place where the laws of physics were being rewritten by the clashing wills of a fallen brother and a defiant king. As the battle between Sun Wukong and Niu Mo Wang reached its fever pitch, the very bedrock of the world seemed to tremble in anticipation of a transformation that had not been seen in 500 years. Imagine a sky that is no longer blue, but a bruised, permanent violet, streaked with the orange glare of volcanic eruptions and the golden flashes of celestial weaponry. Sun Wukong, supported now by the heavy-hitting Jubaji and a host of heavenly soldiers, had pushed the Bull Demon King to the absolute limit of his humanoid patience. Niu Mo Wang, standing amidst the ruins of his scorched kingdom, realized that the time for maces and tricks had passed. To survive the combined weight of the Buddha's destiny and the Jade Emperor's law, he had to shed the skin of the sage and return to the primordial root of his existence. He had to become the bull. Close your eyes and listen to the sound of a mountain cracking open from the inside out. It is not a sharp, brittle snap, but a deep, rhythmic groan that vibrates through the soles of your feet and resonates in the hollow of your chest. This was the sound of Niu Mo Wang's final transformation. His humanoid form, already Titan-like, began to ripple and expand with a terrifying liquid grace. His bronze skin, etched with the scars of 1,000 years, dissolved into a radiant, shimmering white fur that caught the light of the fires like 1,000 silver mirrors. His muscles swelled until they resembled the rolling foothills of a mountain range, and his armor, forged from the scales of subterranean dragons, shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, falling through the air like a rain of black glass. And then, through the smoke and the haze of battle, he stood revealed in his benxiang, his original divine essence, the great white bull. The sheer scale of this creature defies the mortal imagination. He stood 6,000 feet tall, a monolith of bone and muscle that reached toward the high ether, his ivory horns grazing the very bottom of the Milky Way. This was not an animal of biology. It was a manifestation of the Yuan Qi, the primordial breath of the universe, shaped into the form of the ultimate engine of the earth. His fur was as white as the snows of the Kunlun Mountains, yet it glowed with a subterranean heat. His eyes were no longer amber lamps, but two vast boiling lakes of crimson magma, reflecting the destruction of the world he had built. When he breathed, the intake of air created a vacuum that pulled the clouds toward him, and when he exhaled, the gale sent the celestial generals reeling through the sky. He was the mountain that had grown legs, the earthquake that had gained a voice, and the bull that refused to be yoked by the laws of heaven. The battle that ensued was a spectacle of cosmic awe. Sun Wukong, realizing that his mortal size was a death sentence against such a titan, was forced to invoke his own greatest magic, the Faxiang Tiandi, the cosmic manifestation of heaven and earth. Imagine two colossi, one a golden-furred ape, and the other an ivory-furred bull, wrestling in the middle of a burning sky. Their blows were not sounds, but shockwaves that flattened forests and caused the tides of the four oceans to surge in terror. Wukong's iron rod, the Ruyi Jinggu Bang, struck the bull's hide with the resonance of a cathedral bell, yet the bull did not flinch. He gored at the golden ape, his horns catching the spiritual energy of the atmosphere and throwing it back as bolts of raw, unrefined lightning. This was the war of the primary powers, a struggle where the rebellion of the earth was meeting the inevitabilities of the sky. But Niu Mo Wang was not just fighting the monkey. The heavens, fearing that the Bull King might actually shatter the pillars of the world, sent their most lethal executioners. Neja, the third prince, descended from the clouds on his wind and fire wheels, his 6 arms wielding the universal ring and the fire-tipped spear. He wove a web of celestial fire around the bull's neck, trying to bind the wild spirit. Li Jing, the pagoda-bearing heavenly king, hovered in the high ether, casting down the golden light of his pagoda to suppress the bull's soul. The air was filled with the smell of ozone, burnt fur, and ancient molten rock. Niu Mo Wang roared, and the sound was a physical weight that pressed the life out of the lesser spirits watching from the shadows. He was a singular, unyielding force, a titan of the outlands, who was prepared to burn the universe to the ground rather than submit to the yoke of a master. Yet, amidst this display of power, there was a profound and crushing melancholy. As the great white bull stood goring at the heavenly host, he was utterly alone. He was fighting for a family that was already broken, for a wife who had been humiliated, and for a son who was a prisoner of the Lotus Throne. His rage was the rage of a king who knew his era was over. He was the last of the great sages, the final remnant of a time when the spirits of the earth were the equals of the gods. The celestial bureaucracy was closing in on him, mapping his wild spaces and categorizing his magic. He was being hemmed in by the architecture of the divine. Every time he tried to transform, to find a way out of the trap, a different god was there to block his path. He was being hunted by the order he had spent his life trying to pacify. The physical end came when Nezha, using his transformations to leap onto the bull's massive head, struck the sensitive point between the horns with his fire-tipped spear. The heat of the Samadhi fire, the very fire the bull's son had mastered, was now used to sear the bull's own brain. But it was the arrival of the Buddha's light that finally broke the spirit of the king. A golden radiance, cold and heavy as lead, descended from the western paradise. It was not a fire that burned, but a presence that filled the mind with the realization of its own insignificance. The bull king, his legs trembling, and his ivory fur stained with the black blood of the deep earth, finally felt the weight of eternity. He looked up at the golden faces of the deities surrounding him, and realized that the bull could no longer run. The surrender of Niu Mo Wang is one of the most significant moments in the journey to the West. It is the moment where the untamable earth is finally brought to heel. He did not surrender to Sun Wukong, for even in his defeat, he viewed the monkey as a traitor to their kind, but he surrendered to the path. He allowed the golden rings to be placed through his nose, the physical symbol of the ox's burden. He was led away toward the western paradise, a titan in chains, walking the very path he had once mocked. As he left the fire mountains, the volcanoes fell silent. The heat dissipated. The red glow of the magma turned to a dull, cold gray, and a silence settled over the obsidian halls that had once echoed with the laughter of a king. The guardian of the outlands was gone, and the wild world grew just a little bit colder, a little bit quieter, and a little bit more certain. The figure of Niu Mo Wang is not merely a literary invention of the Ming dynasty. He is a creature woven from the deepest, oldest layers of the Chinese spiritual consciousness. To truly understand the weight of the Bull King, we must look beyond the pages of the journey to the West and explore the flickering shadows of the Fengshen Yanyi, the investiture of the gods, and the prehistoric shamanistic traditions that predated the written word. In these ancient scrolls, the bull is never just an animal or a demon. It is a celestial engine, a creature of thunder and lightning that bridges the gap between the dark, fertile soil and the bright, indifferent heavens. Niu Mo Wang is the culmination of 1,000 years of bovine symbolism. A king who carries the weight of prehistoric rituals in his curved, ivory horns. In the Fengshen Yanyi, we find the prototypes of the Bull King's immense power. We encounter the figure of the Kui Niu, a primordial bull of the eastern seas. Imagine a creature with a dark, shimmering blue body that stands on a single massive leg amidst the crashing waves of the early world. Its voice was not a bellow, but a roar of thunder that could be heard for 1,000 miles. This was the beast that the Yellow Emperor, Huang Di, sought during his catastrophic wars against the chaos giant Qiyu. The emperor realized that to defeat the spirits of the storm, he needed the skin of the bull. He crafted a drum from the hide of the Kui Niu and drumsticks from the bones of the thunder god, and the sound of that drum shattered the morale of the rebel armies. This is the ancestral memory that Niu Mo Wang carries. The bull as a source of cosmic vibration, a creature whose very hide is a vessel for the frequency of the universe. Furthermore, we must consider the role of the bull in the Taoist map of the stars. In the ancient Chinese zodiac and the 28 mansions of the sky, the ox represents the cold, steady labor of the winter months, the power that prepares the earth for the rebirth of spring. Niu Mo Wang embodies the inverted side of this constellation. He is the winter that refuses to end, the strength that remains frozen and formidable. In many of the oldest Taoist paintings, the highest sages are often depicted riding oxen, most notably Lao Tzu, the founder of the Tao, who is said to have ridden a green ox through the Hangu Pass to the west. The bull is the chosen vehicle of the wise because it represents a balanced, grounded immortality. When Niu Mo Wang called himself a great sage, he was claiming this lineage. He was saying that his demonhood was not a lack of cultivation, but a different kind of it, a dark, terrestrial Taoism that found its divinity in the earth rather than the clouds. The connection between Niu Mo Wang and the figure of Qiu is perhaps the most visceral. Qiu, the ancient god of war and the legendary inventor of metal weapons, was often depicted with the head of a bull, horns sharp enough to gore the gods, and the body of a man. He was the original rebel, the one who challenged the solar authority of the Yellow Emperor. In many mythic interpretations, Niu Mo Wang is the spiritual successor to Qiu. He represents the indigenous wild power of the prehistoric past, the spirits of the iron and the fire that existed before the refined jade palace bureaucracy of the later dynasties was ever imagined. When Niu Mo Wang fights with his mixed iron mace, he is not just using a weapon. He is channeling the memory of the first smiths who pulled metal from the furnace and turned it into sovereignty. As you explore the atmospheric depths of these ancient texts, notice the recurring theme of the white bull. In Buddhist scripture, the white bull is often a symbol of the Mahayana, the great vehicle that carries all beings toward enlightenment. There is a famous parable in the Lotus Sutra of the burning house, where a father lures his children out of a fire by promising them carts pulled by goats, deer, and finally, a magnificent white ox. Niu Mo Wang's transformation into a great white bull is a deliberate, ironic nod to this symbolism. He is the great vehicle of the demon world, the structure that holds the spirits together. His eventual surrender to the Buddha is not just a defeat, it is a symbolic absorption of the wild earth into the divine order. The white bull of destruction becomes the white bull of the path. The regional variations of the Bull King's myth also add layers of complexity. In the folklore of the southern provinces, there are ancient stories of water bull kings who live in the depths of the Yangtze River, guarding subterranean hordes of jade and controlling the flow of the summer floods. These legends merged with the volcanic, iron-rich imagery of the northern Fire Mountains to create the multifaceted Niu Mo Wang we know today. He is a creature of both the magma and the deep water, a rider of the golden-eyed beast that can traverse both realms. This duality is a hallmark of Chinese mythology, the idea that the greatest powers are those that can bridge the contradictions of the world, those that are as fluid as water and as hard as stone. To read the ancient scrolls is to see Niu Mo Wang as a recurring ghost in the Chinese imagination. He appears in the temple murals of the Tang Dynasty as a fierce, bovine protector guardian, and in the woodblock prints of the Ming as a tragic, fallen titan. He is the personification of the stubborn, unyielding vitality of the landscape. He is the mountain that speaks, the bull that refuses the yoke, and the king who remembers the era before the gods were kings. When we listen to the story of Niu Mo Wang, we are not just listening to a fairy tale. We are listening to the echoes of a prehistoric world, a world where the thunder was the voice of a bull, and the fire was the breath of a sage. He remains the guardian of the old ways, standing at the crossroads of history and myth, his amber eyes still glowing with the light of 1,000 forgotten fires. He is the memory of the earth, and as long as the mountains stand and the thunder rolls, his story will never truly be finished. The end of a kingdom is rarely marked by a single explosion. It is defined by a heavy, suffocating silence that follows the exhaustion of a titan. As Niu Mo Wang stood amidst the cooling embers of the fire mountains, the physical pain of his wounds was a distant vibration compared to the absolute crushing weight of his spiritual defeat. He had fought with the strength of the mountains. He had gored the very clouds with his ivory horns, and he had summoned the primal heat of the earth's core. Yet, as the golden light of the western paradise descended like a net of molten sun, he realized that his era of autonomy had been extinguished. The bull demon king, the sage who pacified heaven, was no longer a sovereign. He was a captive. Imagine the sensation of the golden ring being threaded through his nose. In the agricultural world of ancient China, this was the ultimate symbol of domestication. For a bull, the nose is the center of his sensitivity and his pride. To be led by a ring is to have one's will surrendered to another. When Neja and the celestial hosts tightened the spiritual bonds around his neck, Niu Mo Wang felt the key of the mountains being severed from his soul. He was no longer a creature of the wild earth. He was being tethered to the celestial plow. The air of the fire mountains, which he had breathed as a master for centuries, suddenly felt thin and alien. He looked toward the cave of the palm leaf, hoping to see the Princess Iron Fan one last time. But the mist of the divine battle had swallowed the horizon. He was being led away into a future where his name would no longer be a roar of rebellion, but a lesson in submission. The march toward the west was a journey through the ruins of his own identity. As he was led across the parched plains and the jagged peaks that had once trembled at his name, Niu Mo Wang watched the spirit world retreat into the shadows. The lesser demons who had once sought his protection now hid in their burrows, watching the fallen king pass with eyes full of terror and confusion. He was a monument of defeat, a walking mountain in chains. The sound of his heavy footsteps on the dry earth was a funeral dirge for the age of the great sages. He thought of Sun Wukong, who walked ahead of the caravan, his golden headband glinting in the twilight. The irony was a bitter draught to swallow. His brother had traded his freedom for a path of redemption, and now Niu Mo Wang was being forced onto that same path, not as a pilgrim, but as a trophy. As they approached the boundaries of the Western paradise, the environment began to shift with a metaphysical intensity. The jagged rocks of the mortal and demon realms were replaced by hills of powdered sandalwood and rivers that flowed with the clarity of liquid jewels. The air did not smell of sulfur or wood smoke. It was a permanent fragrance of lotus and incense. To Niu Mo Wang, this beauty was a cage. He was a creature of the soil, the mud, and the fire. The refined perfection of the Buddhist heavens felt like a spiritual vacuum. He felt the weight of his 72 transformations being locked away, one by the golden seals of the bodhisattvas. He was being stripped of his many masks until only the core of the bull remained, a core that was now required to learn the lessons of patience and humility. In the presence of the great Buddha, the scale of Niu Mo Wang's existence was finally put into perspective. Imagine standing before a mountain of light, where the very concept of self begins to dissolve. The Buddha did not speak to him with anger. There was no judgment in the divine gaze, only a vast, terrifying compassion. To Niu Mo Wang, this was the hardest blow of all. He had lived his life as a rebel, an enemy of the established order. To be met with compassion instead of a sword was the ultimate invalidation of his struggle. He was told that his strength was a gift of the universe, but that he had used it to build a palace of ego. His captivity was presented as a mercy, a chance to turn his asmagan, his god strength, toward the benefit of all sentient beings. This transition from a demon king to a guardian of the Dharma is a recurring theme in the journey to the West and the broader tapestry of Eastern mythology. It represents the taming of the wild impulses of nature. Niu Mo Wang was placed in the service of the Western powers, his massive frame used to support the architecture of the divine, or to guard the gateways of the enlightened realms. He became a silent protector, a figure who stood at the edge of the light, reminding all who entered that even the most stubborn heart can be brought to peace. But one wonders what remained of the king within that silent guardian. Did he still dream of the red glow of the magma? Did he still feel the phantom weight of the iron mace in his hand? The fate of his family added a layer of profound tragedy to his submission. The Princess Iron Fan, left alone in the cooling Fire Mountains, eventually turned to a life of quiet cultivation, seeking a different kind of peace to escape the memory of her husband's fall. Their son, the Red Boy, was already a servant of Guan Yin. The family of the bull was no longer a family. It was a collection of scattered disciples, each serving a master they had once defied. This was the true cost of their rebellion. The heavens had not just defeated them, it had reorganized them. It had taken the fire and the wind and the earth and put them to work in the celestial gardens. As you imagine Niu Mo Wang standing in the gardens of the West, his amber eyes reflecting the golden lotuses, think of the endurance that still defines him. He is the bull that survives the winter. Even in his submission, he is a titan. He represents the idea that the most powerful forces of nature are those that can be channeled but never truly destroyed. He is the memory of the wild earth living in the heart of the civilized heaven. The silence of his new life is the silence of a deep, subterranean river. It flows without a sound, but its power is unchanged. He is the great sage who was pacified by the very heaven he sought to pacify, a king who found his final kingdom in the quiet service of the light. The thunder has faded, but the bull remains, a silent monument to the era of the giants and the inevitable turning of the cosmic wheel. To tell the story of Niu Mo Wang is to recount the slow, agonizing closing of a door on the primordial age of the world. He was the last of the great sages, a figure who stood at the threshold between the era of myths and the era of laws. In the ancient Chinese consciousness, the Bull King was more than a character in a novel. He was a philosophical statement. He represented the vitality of the wild, the raw, unrefined energy that existed before the gods carved the world into provinces and duties. His life, his rebellion, and his eventual domesticity provide a mirror to the human struggle for autonomy in a universe that demands order. To understand Niu Mo Wang's legacy, we must look at the echoes he left behind in the soil, the temples, and the very concept of the demon in the Eastern mind. The primary symbol of the Bull King is, of course, the bull itself, a creature that is both the bringer of life and the herald of destruction. In the agricultural heart of ancient China, the ox was the silent engine of civilization. It turned the soil, it pulled the heavy loads, and its strength was the difference between a harvest and a famine. By making his greatest antagonist a bull, the author of Journey to the West was playing with a deeply rooted cultural archetype. Niu Mo Wang was the unyoked ox. He was the power of the harvest turned against the farmer. He reminded the people that the earth is not a passive servant. It is a sleeping giant that can, at any moment, rise up and reclaim its sovereignty. His rebellion was a spiritual manifestation of the earthquake and the storm, forces that are necessary for the world's renewal, but terrifying to those who live within its walls. This leads us to the complex nature of the Yaogua, or demon, in Chinese mythology. Unlike the demons of the West, who are often seen as fallen angels or creatures of pure malice, the Yaogua of the East are often cultivators of the wild. They are beings who have achieved immortality through their own effort, without the permission of the heavenly bureaucracy. Niu Mo Wang was the peak of this tradition. He was the self-made king. His legacy is the idea that greatness can be achieved outside the established system. He provided a voice for the outcasts, the spirits of the mountains, and the rivers who did not fit into the rigid categories of the Taoist heavens. He was the patron of the unauthorized spirit, the one who found divinity in the shadow. Furthermore, Niu Mo Wang's domestic life, his marriage to a Rakshasi, and his affair with a fox spirit adds a layer of social commentary to his myth. He was a king caught between the old world of elemental power and the new world of refined luxury. His struggle to maintain his family while expanding his influence reflects the eternal human tension between the hearth and the horizon. His failure to hold his family together is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of his immense, tragic humanity. He was a god-like being who suffered from the very same fractures that plague the mortal heart. This humanization is why he remains one of the most beloved figures in the Chinese pantheon. He is the demon we recognize in ourselves. The death of the Seven Sages era, marked by Niu Mo Wang's capture, signifies the end of the mythological frontier. After his fall, the wild spaces of the world were no longer truly wild. The mountains were governed by local deities appointed by the Jade Emperor, and the spirits were required to register their deeds in the celestial ledgers. Niu Mo Wang's submission was the final act of the investiture, the process by which the chaotic energies of the early world were brought under the control of the state. He was the last barrier to a fully organized cosmos. His absence left a void that was filled by the quiet, predictable laws of the heavens. But something was lost in that transition, the raw, unpredictable vitality that made the Huaguo Mountain era so vibrant. Even today, in the remote villages of the southern provinces, the shadow of the Bull King remains. There are temples dedicated to the Ox King, where farmers offer incense not to a demon, but to a protector of the livestock and a bringer of rain. These local cults represent the pacified version of Niu Mo Wang, the king who has turned his strength towards the service of the people. They see him as a figure of immense endurance, a god who knows the weight of the burden and the heat of the sun. He has become a symbol of the working spirit, the strength that persists through the hard seasons. The sage who pacified heaven has become the sage who protects the soil. As we conclude this journey into the heart of the Fire Mountains, consider the image of the Bull King one last time. He is not a villain to be defeated, but a force of nature to be respected. He is the reminder that beneath the surface of our ordered lives, there is a fire that never truly goes out. He is the thunder that rolls before the rain, the mountain that stands against the wind, and the bull that refuses to be forgotten. His story is the story of the earth itself, stubborn, powerful, and, ultimately, part of a much larger cosmic dance. Thank you for journeying through the mists of the ancient East, from the emerald peaks of Huaguo to the obsidian halls of the Fire Mountains. If you found peace in the presence of the Bull King, and a deeper understanding of the shadows that move within the light, please leave a like and subscribe to Hearths of Myths. May your hearth be warm, your spirit be as unyielding as the bull, and may you always find the strength to walk your own path, no matter how long the journey. Sleep well, in the knowledge that the mountains are watching, and the ancient sages are still whispering in the wind. The story is told, the fires are low, and the night is deep.